Great. Welcome everyone to our second Future Directions Forum address. For those of you who haven't been to one of our addresses before, either this year or in previous years, the introductions I give to our address givers are a bit different than the ones you're used to. So I'm going to tell a very short story about Riana's work, and I hope you enjoy it. So to unpack the nature of our universe, some physicists think about strings. To attack and solve complex equations, some mathematicians think about knots. Why do scholars choose to think about aspects of life that, at least on the surface, appear to have little to do with their topic of study? Well, sometimes in our work we reach crossroads. We've learned enough about a topic to understand it, and now we have to think about two distinct, interrelated endeavors. One endeavor involves trying to communicate what we know to those who do not have the privilege of our expertise. Sometimes we conquer this endeavor by trying to think about aspects of daily life that resonate with people, the kinds of things that build bridges to knowledge. If we could only develop a novel lens that connects the knowledge that we wish to communicate to tangible, approachable frames of reference. Another endeavor involves trying to leverage these novel lenses to make new meaning in what we've tried so hard to understand and solve. In some ways, strings and knots become the means by which we in academia not only disseminate principles about cellular phenomena, but also make new discoveries, and perhaps learn some more. I consider it a privilege that I had a front row seat to this process as it pertains to the work of today's speaker. A while back, I asked Dr. Riana Anderson if she'd be interested in writing an article for our journal's Future Directions series, an invitation she graciously accepted. As they prepare their articles, I encourage authors in our Future Directions series to take risks, to boldly lay a path for new frontiers in their areas of expertise. Not surprisingly, I was soon enthralled by a message Riana sent me after accepting my invitation, which provided me with insight into plans for her article. To unpack the nature of racism and attack its impacts on mental health, Riana's lens involves reimagining concepts surrounding racism using principles from biology. In her work, Riana poses a bold question. If we understand racism as a public health problem, might research and theory from public health reveal insights into novel approaches for confronting racism and its impact on human functioning? In academia, the best of us leverage tools of our disciplines to learn, inform others, and call the world to action. In Riana's work, I see the physicist who unpacks the nature of our universe. I see the mathematician who attacks the most complex of equations. I see brilliance, I see tenacity, I see action. Put simply, Riana's lens on racism reminds me why I love this job. I am thrilled that she is with us today to inspire all of us to unpack and attack some of those ubiquitous, perennial, and pressing problems we face. Everyone, I give you Dr. Riana Anderson.
Thank you so much, Andy. That was really lovely. And oh, thank you for those claps for him. Yes, clap it up. I don't know if folks don't have their cameras on because they think that something is happening. I want to see your faces. So let's get those faces on the screen if you're allowed to, and if you are willing and able to. I would love to see. There are some beautiful faces. Hello, hello. Greetings and salutations. So that's kind of my style. I'm going to ask you all to talk with me throughout the presentation. I consider myself a new age professor who can handle the chat and my presentations at the same time. So if you have questions, if you have thoughts, go ahead and pipe them into the chat. Give me reactions as you go along. I want to feel the energy on this screen. I had the privilege and pleasure of being at the American Psychological Association conference this past weekend, and being on stage and getting the energy of my colleagues just reinvigorated me. So I would love that as much as possible here. So I'm actually going to share with you the presentation that I did at APA. So give me just a moment to get it on the screen. So I'm going to let you know right now, you'll need your cell phones. I think that I'm cool, so I use QR codes. So I'm going to just ask you to, whenever you see one, go ahead and click on your camera so that you can get the link that I'm sharing with you. So again, the paper is about this idea of vaccinating children against the virus of racism. And I'm really excited to introduce that topic to you today. If you want to learn more about me or my work, feel free to engage with this QR code here. And if you're on Twitter and want to follow along today, you're also welcome to follow me at Riana Elise on there. So I'll give you just a second to engage with that screen. All right. There's also a brief version of this TEDx talk, or excuse me, through the TEDx platform. I did a TEDx Detroit talk on this topic. And this is really one of the points that Dr. De Los Reyes was bringing up around how do we translate for different audiences. So at this point, I've written an academic paper. I'm taking it to communities in an 8-minute talk, and now I'm talking with you all about 20 minutes today with this keynote. So I want you to think about how you can translate that, and go ahead and feel free to utilize this QR code. It's really big right now. It looks obnoxious, but when I was on the stage at APA, it was much smaller. So that's my reason. I just want to let you know why it's obnoxious there. All right, so let's get into this. So you all, on December 6th, 2019, I gave a talk at Indiana University, and I described my method of reducing the impact of racism on youth mental health. Someone in the audience commented that my approach was similar to that of inoculation, since I introduced youth and their families to the concept of racism so that they feel more agentic in destroying this problematic plague. As I started better understanding epidemiology, so too did the world, losing almost 6.5 million lives since that talk to the novel SARS-CoV-2 virus. We watched the spread and efforts to mitigate this public health problem, and also watched the social barriers that prevented these efforts, including governmental interference, density of communities, and socio-demographic factors. Enter psychologists. I believe that one of our strengths is the ability to translate concepts to people, whether they be our clients, students, or the general public. And as a professor in a school of public health, my psych superpowers allowed me to get to the essential elements surrounding the challenges of COVID, and to help us figure out the world we were living in. Namely, what is a virus? How is it transmitted? And how do we stop it? Okay, so let's start at the beginning. What is a virus? Well, Oxford defines it as a harmful or corrupting influence. It can copy itself and affect the well-being of others, and it can change over time. It's transmitted in 4 modes: direct, indirect, airborne, and vehicular. And an article I was reading in the Washington Post last week put our current wave in real interesting context, and it summed up those first 2 points really neatly. It said if viruses have a purpose, it's to make copies of themselves. They don't have the tools to do that on their own, so they have to hijack cells from a host like you and me in order to reproduce. The copying process can be sloppy, so mutations abound. So I want you to keep that in mind as we go through today's presentation. It makes copies by hijacking you and me, and in that copying process, it's messy. All right, the last thing that we need to know about viruses are how we beat them. So we can do that through prevention, like with a mask or vaccine, or an intervention, like with the ventilator. So the more I started learning about virology, the more similarity I saw to another concept. So in my work, I realized that it isn't about 6 feet of space, rather how we handle race. So the virus of racism, just like COVID-19, harms individuals and groups, and is copied between people, especially in the same house or community. It's transmitted in 4 ways: direct, indirect, institutional, and structural. And we have certainly watched it morph over decades to become a part of America's DNA. That means this virus has gone beyond a pandemic. It is endemic or persistent to our society. And even when I emailed Dr. De Los Reyes about this concept very early on, at that point, we saw COVID as something that was inherently a pandemic. It was new. And now the language, even just 2 years out, with respect to what's going on, is that it's endemic. So when we're thinking about racism, how long it's been around in the United States, we certainly know that it is endemic to our society. All right, so to the population that I work with the most, the question is, how does racism infect and affect children? Well, children are especially harmed by racism since they're not developed enough to make sense of the bad germs or terms coming from adults. They're more vulnerable to those beliefs and actions. that are passed down both explicitly and implicitly. Not all children experience racism the same, though. Just like with COVID-19, some exposed to the virus may develop severe symptoms requiring life-saving care, while others may not show symptoms at all, even in the same house. Yet, whether we can see it or not, racism destroys its target. And this target is often Black children who suffer the greatest exposure and symptoms. We're talking 5 incidents a day or more. Yet across race, the psychological literature on racism is clear. Personal and vicarious experiences of racial discrimination often leads to difficulties with children's everyday experiences, like self-esteem, sense of belonging, and relationships, and more severe psychosocial effects, including depression, anxiety, and conduct problems. So knowing what viruses do to our children, what can we do to treat the virus of racism? Well, prevention and intervention methods can also be used to stop and drop racism in our communities. Individual states, national public health and medical organizations, and the American Psychological Association have declared that racism is a crisis, so we gotta meet this public health problem with a public health solution. It's time to roll up those sleeves. If we want to stop racism, we have to first admit that it is here and it is harmful. When the US government denied the pandemic in March 2020, they directly caused hundreds of thousands of deaths that could have been prevented. We know that viruses are harmful and deadly. So rather than deny its existence, let's devise our resistance. Anticipating racism allows us to better see, feel, and do something about this social virus so we can stop its circulation. I mentioned that I gave this talk at the APA this weekend, so I want to show you what the American Psychological Association is doing in this way. As part of the task force for the elimination of racism, we understood the importance of just acknowledging and constructed a resolution that pointed to the field and organization's role in perpetuating harm to communities of color. As psychologists, we know that it often starts within before others can begin. Secondly, in the same way tests alerted the infected and their surrounding community to the presence of COVID-19, assessment is crucial. It is possible in different therapeutic modes, like a therapist and her client, school counselors and their students, hospitals and their pediatric data, and cities and their policies. The field of psychology can assess and redress racism. Again, going back to what the APA is doing, in this task force, we had a second resolution, which allowed us to assess our current racial equity progress before moving forward. We knew it was crucial. We couldn't just do things that were new and novel within our field if we didn't know the current state of it. So the Office of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion engaged in an audit to advise the field on where gaps still existed. Now think about it for yourselves with respect to your institution, your program. Where do you see gaps? Where do you see it in your practice as well? How could such an audit benefit your organization or your practice? Beyond prevention strategies, I want to promote my primary strategy to address racism, and that is through intervention. If children are already exposed to the vile virus of racism, we must talk to them about it. I study racial socialization, which is the talk that parents and other close adults have with children to protect them from harm. Socialization allows us to drop kick racism with families and communities because it prepares children for what will happen to them and heals them from racial encounters they already had. Some parents think talking about racism will make their children sick, but it actually relieves them of stress, letting them breathe easier. Our research with hundreds of families shows that the talk leads to better mental health outcomes for children and parents, teachers, and therapists. Yet some socialization providers are nervous discussing race with children, and this makes sense, y'all. But what's really important here is that your actions can equip children to address this virus, leading them to be more confident and courageous when they see injustice. We can have healthier communities for our children, but we have to be brave enough to experience the sting first. So how can we be brave and boldly eradicate this dangerous social virus? Well, the main challenges that I've told you about thus far involved ideas of denial, data, and discussion. So I want to suggest 4 modes of healing. From misinformation to truth. Vaccines have become politically charged, so too have discussions about race and racism. In the midst of backlash toward critical race theory by parents and politicians, we must acknowledge what was and is broken to work toward racial repair. Training clinicians is one of the ways that we can go about this. So in the clinical training developed by our lab, we spend hours exploring who we are, unpacking all of our racial teachings and learnings, and doing so with truth and data, so we can be the best clinicians for the youth we serve. So on this screen here, you see some of the items that we go through. We spend 6 hours learning about, unpacking, and describing some of these phenomena working with children. From lack of information to resources. Opportunities that highlight understanding and addressing racism must be provided early and often. Seeking education at different levels can help to reduce our fear and allow us to find the resources we need to protect and prepare children. In the fall, really in a few weeks, I'll actually be a fellow at the Center for the Advanced Study in the Behavioral Sciences at Stanford. Some of the colleagues who I work with will be building out an app that provides resources to youth of color who are curious about race or experiencing racism. And we're going to be giving the knowledge that we've garnered from the academy back to the people. And we hope to call that Teen Talk. From hesitancy to agency. While there may be initial discomfort when getting a vaccine, the long-term benefits give us the power to improve the racial climate for our children. I would love for you to take a listen to why children may also be hesitant when they talk to us about these important topics. So those strategies, again, when we're talking about the talk, that's something that we do. And the cost of not having the talk is people being able to wage whatever they want to say or do to your child, and your child having no buffer, no pillow, no exposure to that being a systemic problem. So now they think it's me. I'm the only one that's being impacted like this. There's something wrong with me and what I've done. I'm going to internalize that. That's depression and anxiety and trauma. And I may not share it with you because you haven't shared with me that it's important enough to bring up. Okay. So in listening to that hesitancy that we have to talk to our children, some of the hesitancy that they may have in talking back to us, we've developed an intervention called Embrace, Engaging, Managing, and Bonding Through Race, to help parents, youth, and clinicians to be more agentic when talking about race. Again, I hope you have that phone handy. If you use this QR code, you'll find more out about our intervention on our website. Give you a few seconds to get that phone out in case it's not. Okay. So I want you to take a listen to the ways that youth, just take a listen to what we're all about here. Embrace, Engaging, Managing, and Bonding Through Race, which takes 7 weeks to complete. So the first and last week, we ask questions about how you're doing, your beliefs, your thoughts, and we have you do some tasks with your family so we can see how you engage with each other. And in the middle weeks, the middle 5 weeks, we give information about the content of racial socialization, how to manage your stress that comes up from racism, and how to bond with your family. And so we take these different approaches so that your family can think about the different things that you deal with, the things that are going on in the world, and that you can deal with those things together, because at the end of the day, your family is going to be the unit working with each other, not us. So we want you all to be the experts of your own lives, which you are. We just want to give you a few tips to help manage the different things that racial encounters bring along with you. Okay, and now just a bit about how youth move into a sense of efficacy from this opportunity to discuss race through Embrace.
Embrace helped me open up about some racial situations that actually happened to me, and it served as a support group for what I was thinking. It helped me think through what I was thinking. And it also served as a catalyst for conversations strictly about race instead of having race as the subtext of a conversation.
All right. So I always love showcasing the folks who are actually a part of our program, not only because they're geniuses, as you could hear from that clip, but because they say it the best, like what their experience is. So to have it not be on the back burner, to have it as the primary thing that they engage in therapy is a unique way of thinking about therapy, but it's something that can be done. So the final thing I wanted to talk with you about as a mode of healing is from being limited to being boundless. So aren't you tired of being sick? When we liberate ourselves of the constraint that racism is here to stay, it helps us envision a future where our children can be free of this dis-ease. In the work of my collaborator with Dr. Daniel Olson, we have been using gamification through VR to create space for youth to practice how they would like to react in discriminatory spaces. So in this slide, we see products from Detroit Public School students who share what it's like to be chased by police and the steps they want to engage in to remedy their hurt. So in the top left picture, you see this young person running. The police officers indicate what's going on, why are you running? And the store owner indicates that he was stealing. And in the bottom right-hand corner, a young person is asking their friend on the computer, hey, Leah, will you join me in the protest? So you're seeing not only what their experiences are, but where they want to go after that experience. They're showing you an activation after this experience. So it's a way for them, again, to unpack what it is that they want to do, how they want to react. And here we see what it's like to embody Tiffany, a student accused of plagiarism, and navigate a tough discussion with her teacher. I want you to note some of the use of racial socialization in the narrative. So just to give you a bit more context of what's going on, you're seeing Mrs. Cirilda. This is her 9th grade honors English course. And there are midterm papers that are being handed back to students today. Mrs. Cirilda has accused Tiffany of plagiarism because it was, quote, too good of a paper. So take a listen to the conversation between Mrs. Cirilda and take a look at how the user chose how they want to react as Tiffany. So just a bit more context there. So again, the user can choose the expression, and what we did as a collaboration was for me to describe the typical ways that racial discrimination shows up in young people. So some of the expressions that you may have seen were that angry could have, excuse me, Tiffany could have been angry, she could have been avoidant, or she could have been checked out completely, right? So there were a number of things that from just the initial body positioning or facial recognition that you could see that we were trying to embody as what the literature says is possible from these discriminatory situations. So it's about 7 minutes into this clip, so you missed some of the beginning parts, but here I just wanted to give you the flavor of what it looks like to imagine that this child could be in a position where they could tell their teacher or express to their teacher what it is that they want to be so that she can go to a classroom where she's not accused of plagiarism. Okay, so to conclude today, When it comes to the current state of health in light of mixed COVID guidance and escalating waves, the US is quite unpredictable. But one thing that is predictable, common, and patterned is racism. It continues to spread through institutions and relationships, causing many to hold their breath and some to prematurely breathe their last. We know that racism is a virus that is harming our children. So to make sure they're healthy, we're going to need prevention and intervention strategies focused on truth, education, agency, and boundlessness, with families and communities centered in treatment. As a psychologist, I'm not saying that we take the blame off the sickening system, but until that system is repaired, my work suggests that we must protect children from psychological harm now. Even as the APA itself notes, we know too well that history can repeat itself, that the past informs the present, and that many harms continue absent purposeful intervention. In learning from our public health fails, racism is not invisible or unique in its coding or something we should allow individuals to make decisions about. It is manageable, it can be detected, and we can beat the virus of racism. So let's put our masks on first to filter out hesitancy and helplessness so that we can keep our children safe. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you all so much for spending a couple hours with us. This is a ton of fun. What a great group. Thank you so much, Dr. Anderson, Dr. Rubino, Dr. Galan, for just a wonderful time. I had a thoroughly wonderful time today, and I hope you all did as well.